my water just broke. I felt like things really intensified.
She was right there and she was coming.
It was an amazing feeling.
I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. I could feel her head.
We heard her cry. We were squeezing hands and she was screaming.
I'm Bryn Hunt Palmer, and you're listening to The Birth Hour. This podcast is designed as a safe place to come together and share childbirth stories. Stick around and join us to hear informative and empowering birth journeys from all over the world. If you're new to the Birth Hour, you may not know that we have an online childbirth course that is evidence-based. It includes 12 modules that take you from your final weeks of pregnancy through obviously preparing for birth and then postpartum and feeding your baby as well. And with enrollment in that course, which is called Know Your Options, you'll get free access to our other course called Beyond the First Latch, where we talk all about pumping, feeding baby, storing milk, going back to paid work if that's part of your plan, all of those things as well. Okay, so if you go to thebirthhour.com/course, you can see everything laid out in the course, module by module, as well as an FAQ section, which will hopefully answer some of your questions if you have any, things like how to get it covered by an FSA account and things like that. It also talks about the bonuses that come with the course, including bi-monthly Zoom calls and access to our private Facebook group. So again, that's thebirthhour.com/course. And you can use the coupon code 100OFF for $100 off enrollment as a podcast listener. We would also love to welcome you into our listener supporter group via Patreon. That's at patreon.com/birthhour. And by becoming a Patreon supporter, you get access to all of our archived episodes. This podcast launched in 2015, so we have over 800 episodes in the archives that are not in the main podcast feed. So you can get your fill of birth stories. And you'll also get access to our private Facebook group for Patreon members, which is a great place to honestly just to search the past posts to get answers to questions, but then of course to ask new questions, find community. It's a really, really great supportive group of people. So I highly recommend joining that. We would love to have you there. We also do monthly Zoom calls with our Patreon supporters, and you get an opportunity to enter your birth story via a different submission form than everyone else uses, and we choose 2 Patreon members each month to share their birth stories. So that is again at patreon.com/birthhour. Today's birth story guest is Mari, and she's going to share her experience having a positive planned cesarean birth, as well as talking about their decision to raise their baby with her sister and friend. So it's a 4-parent household. Today's episode is brought to you by Air Doctor. Americans spend an average of 90% of their time indoors, but did you know that indoor air can be up to 100 times more polluted than outdoor air? You can breathe easy with Air Doctor, the award-winning air purifier that eliminates 99.99% of dangerous contaminants like allergens, viruses, smoke, gases, mold spores, and more. Air Doctor was voted Best Air Purifier by Newsweek, so it's no surprise that 98% of Air Doctor customers agree their home's air feels cleaner, safer, and healthier. Unlike other purifiers, Air Doctor captures invisible particles 100 times smaller than standard HEPA filters. We have air purifiers in our bedroom as well as the kids' bedrooms, and everyone has been sleeping better. I love how quiet the Air Doctor is. It's like the perfect amount of white noise. I would absolutely splurge on this for a nursery for baby. Like, get the cheap crib from IKEA and put your money towards this so that your baby has clean air in their nursery. We also have one in our living room, and I've noticed a huge difference after cooking and things like that. It just really clears the room really quickly. Head to airdoctorpro.com and use the promo code BIRTHHOUR to get up to $300 off today. Air Doctor comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee plus a 3-year warranty, which is an $84 value for free. You can get this exclusive podcast-only offer now at airdoctorpro.com, airdoctorpro.com, using the promo code BIRTHHOUR. All right, let's hear from Mari. Hi, Mari. Welcome to the Birth Hour. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Hi, Bryn. I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, before we get to your story, can you tell listeners a little bit about you and your family?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Mari. I live in Chicago. I'm a mental health therapist here. My family's a little bit unusual in that I have a 19-month-old who I'm raising as a team of 4 people. So There's me and my partner, and then we're also raising the kiddo with my sister and one of my best friends. And then the 5 of us, we all live in a 20-person co-op where there's communal meals, there's a shared kitchen, a shared living room, a shared library, and then we each have our own kind of bedroom or personal spaces.
Very cool. Sounds kind of like college, but like everyone like has it together by now a little bit more.
Yeah, hopefully for the most part.
Awesome. And I love the community aspect of raising a kid, something that comes up on the podcast a lot that most people don't have. So it's great that you figured that out.
Yeah.
All right. So why don't you go ahead, and I know you have a lot to share as far as pre-pregnancy and getting pregnant. So why don't you just go ahead and start with wherever you're comfortable.
Yeah, so I might share briefly around the decision to be a 4-parent household and how that happened. And then I might dive more into pregnancy stuff, if that sounds all right to you.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, so my partner and I, we started dating in 2018 and got more serious in 2019. And I'm someone who's always known I wanted kids. Like even when I was a kid, I knew I wanted to be a parent someday. And my partner also wanted to have kids, but had a lot of hesitancy around kind of the state of parenting in nuclear families. I think we both saw a lot of parents who were extremely overwhelmed, didn't have time and space for much outside of parenting. And so one thing that we talked a lot about early in our relationship is we wanted something a little bit different, but we didn't have many models for that. And so weren't sure exactly what we wanted. And one thing that we came up with is we liked the idea of parenting with more than just the 2 of us, to have more capacity. We're both people who care deeply about our friendships and invest a lot in our friendships. And so we were like, what if it wasn't just the 2 of us? What if we brought in some friends? And so from early in our relationship, we kind of started casually talking about this wish with some of our friends to kind of scope out interest. And initially there were some folks who we talked about it with in a pretty casual way, but for various reasons, it wasn't the right time or the right fit. Many of our friends live across the country, or were in grad school or transitioning careers, or were in new partnerships and they didn't know where it was going to go and not ready to make a big commitment raising a kid with friends. But then a few years later, things started to come together. My sister decided that she wanted to move from Ohio, where she was living, to Chicago and move into the co-op that we were already living in. And she was someone who had always been on the fence about having kids. She's an artist and really liked prioritizing her career and didn't necessarily want to make the sacrifices that one would have to make to have a kid, but really wanted to be involved in kids' lives. And she's someone who had nannied in the past. And so she expressed interest of like, I would love to be really involved in raising a kid with you all. And then we got closer to a friend of ours named Sawyer, who also had nannied before, also really loved the idea of being really involved in kids' lives, but was not at a place where he wanted to have his own biological children. And so he expressed like, okay, what could this look like? And then the 4 of us slowly decided that this was something that we wanted to do all together. And we didn't necessarily have it all worked out ahead of time. Like in many ways, we're still working it out. Like, what does it mean? What does the exact commitment look like? But we did decide, okay, we're going to do this together. And that might evolve over time, kind of what role we each play, but that we all want to be kind of a big part of this kid's life.
Very cool. Yeah, it seems like it would change a lot, like as the kid gets older and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so we kind of got that worked out. And then I'll dive more into pregnancy stuff. So in 2021, I hadn't seen a OBGYN for a little while because of the pandemic, because of switching health insurance, because of being a grad student. But after I graduated, pandemic was feeling slightly safer to go out mass to a doctor. I went and saw an OBGYN and got diagnosed with having a fibroid. And I was not familiar with fibroids. That brought up a lot of questions for me around what that would mean for getting pregnant, having a baby, etc. And this initial doctor, I was really grateful that she diagnosed the fibroid. So I have some really mixed feelings about her, but we had just a very odd conversation about the fibroid. She was like, okay, you have this fibroid. It's relatively big. And I was like, okay, like I want to have kids in the future. What does that mean? And she's like, well, you could get pregnant, but you might have all these complications. You might have premature like more likely to have a premature baby. You might have growth restrictions. There's all these risks. I was like, okay, so is there anything else I can do? She's like, well, you also could have surgery, but it's a really bloody surgery. And I was like, okay, so what do you recommend? And she's like, well, it's really up to you.
Really bloody surgery. What?
And she repeated like 3 times that it was a really bloody surgery. And I was just left so stumped. I was like, okay, like that doesn't feel like the data I need to make an informed decision. Like, what are the risks of the surgery? What are the risks of the pregnancy? She gave me no statistics, no information, just, okay, there's all these bad pregnancy risks and it's a really bloody surgery. And I've been lucky. I've been a relatively healthy person medically. And so I don't have a lot of experience, or at that time, I didn't have a lot of experience navigating the medical system. And so in retrospect, I'm like, why didn't she just say, hey, I don't know a lot about fibroids. Go find yourself a fibroid expert. Here's a referral. But she did not say that.
Yeah, she clearly like didn't want to do that surgery. She was like scared of it.
I guess not.
That's so strange.
Luckily for myself, I knew like, this doesn't feel right. She is not giving me the guidance I need. So I decided I needed to find more of an expert in that field. But that took me a little while to do. I didn't really know how to find specialists, how to go to a specialist. I was also switching jobs, so I switched insurance. But luckily, eventually I was able to get in with a fibroid specialist and have an appointment with her. And she was great. I had my MRI, I had my ultrasound, and she was very clear on what I needed. She was like, this is a very big fibroid. It's 7 centimeters. It's very embedded in your uterine wall. Like, you are not going to be able to have a successful pregnancy with this fibroid. It absolutely, if you want a pregnancy in the future, you need to get surgery. This is what the surgery would look like. And if you have the surgery, you would need a C-section at 37 weeks. So that brought up really mixed reaction. She was a doctor that I felt a lot of trust for. It was really nice to hear all the information and have a clear path forward, but definitely brought up a big reaction in terms of finding out even before I was pregnant that I would need a C-section. And just to give a little bit of background around myself, when my older brother was born, my mom had a fairly traumatic C-section. She was at a hospital that was not very patient-focused or certainly not birthing mother-focused. And she had a doctor who was on call, who wanted to get to a baseball game and basically forced her into a C-section in order to get to a baseball game. And she felt very kind of unheard, unseen, unlistened to. And then with my older sister, had a VBAC, but had to fight really hard for the VBAC, including locking herself in a bathroom when nurses were pressuring her into a C-section, and then ended up having me and my little brother as home births. And so I was coming in with maybe some pretty strong negative associations towards C-sections, and I was coming in not necessarily having envisioned a home birth because I'm a pretty anxious person, but I had looked at home birth midwives. I knew that was something I would discuss with my partner and consider. And certainly if I wasn't doing a home birth, still would look for something like midwives within a hospital. And so it took me a while to come to terms with the idea that if I were to have kids in the future, my birth experience would look just completely different from what I had imagined. And I'm really grateful that I found this out over a year before having a baby, because it just gave me a lot of time to process, accept, come to terms with. I'm a big BIRTHHOUR listener, and I hear so many episodes of people, a week before realizing their baby's breech and realizing they have to have a C-section. And I think that would have just been really hard for me. And so the fact that I had all this time, I'm so grateful for. And one conversation in particular really helped me accept the idea of a C-section. I talked to a family member who's a doctor, and one thing she said is, hey, like planned C-sections can look really different in certain ways than emergency C-sections. And a lot of people's negative associations with C-sections come from people's experiences with emergency C-sections, of having to recover from basically all of vaginal birth, being in labor, not sleeping for 24, 48 hours, and then having to recover from surgery. And often those are rushed. Often you don't have much time. Often, you don't feel in charge. And she's like, a planned C-section, like, you know exactly when the baby's going to come. You can schedule it with your own doctor. You know who's going to be giving it. It's really relaxed. There's a lot of spaciousness. And that was helpful to hear and kind of have me move past like, okay, my C-section experience is not going to be my mom's C-section experience. And I'm a planner. I'm an anxious person. I was like, it could be really nice to know exactly what day my baby's coming, to have all of my support system ready, to have my house completely ready. And I started to lean into like, okay, maybe this, not necessarily a good thing, but maybe this can be an okay thing. And maybe there can be things about this experience that I can be kind of embrace. So I had my fibroid surgery, and that luckily went really well. And that was also useful for me because it kind of was a test run for the C-section of like, how do I feel after having my abdomen cut open? Like, what does recovery look like for me? I had never had surgery before. So like, for that surgery, I think I didn't do a good job with managing pain. I was doing a lot of like chasing pain instead of staying on top of pain. So I learned a lot about kind of taking care of myself post-surgery, what I need, what my support system needs to look like. And it was like this, okay, I have this like dry run without a baby so that I can do better once I'm recovering from surgery, but with a baby.
It's a funny way to look at it.
Yeah. And it was, I knew that as soon as I got the green light from a doctor, I was going to try and get pregnant. And so, the C-section was on my mind kind of throughout that recovery phase.
Did the surgery involve like a hospital stay or was it outpatient?
It was a one-night hospital stay. So,
Okay.
They kept it at 23 hours because then according to insurance, it's technically outpatient, but I did spend the night.
Okay.
They actually almost tried to get me to go home at 9 p.m. after the surgery, which was somewhat surprising to me because I still felt horrible. And then I explained that at my house, I have to go up a flight of stairs to go to the bathroom. And they're like, okay, you can stay. And I was like, thank God.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, yeah, I feel like just staying the night in the hospital, if you haven't done that before, is a good trial run for sure.
Yeah. I got to experience how little sleep you get in the hospital.
Yeah.
So, in retrospect, I was like, maybe I would have been better off going home because my blood pressure kept just going right. I had pretty low blood pressure and it kept going just below what sets the monitor off. So they had to come and retake my blood pressure so many times during the night. And I think I was totally fine. I just have low blood pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I survived and came home and got lots of sleep once I was home.
Good.
Yeah. So then I had to wait 6 months to try and get pregnant to let my uterus heal. And so I waited the 6 months and then I got my IUD out, and I think I got pregnant maybe on about the third cycle post my IUD coming out, which is pretty quick for your body resettling after an IUD coming out. But certainly I had some nervousness around, would this surgery affect my fertility? And so I really feel for people who are trying for a long time because 3 months felt like forever, even though it's in the grand scheme of things, relatively quick. And I was really, really grateful for that. I think maybe on a second kid, I would be more relaxed about it. But just that question of
Maybe.
can I get pregnant?
Yeah.
It's such a scary question if you've envisioned kids your whole life.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, what was it like finding out you were pregnant and how was your pregnancy?
Yeah. So early pregnancy was really emotionally hard. So my partner has a genetic disorder and, it's something that they can live with, but, they needed to have open heart surgery as a young adult and have kind of some ongoing things that they need to manage. And they have found living with this genetic disorder quite stressful. And so they really did not want to pass it on to our kids. And we had kind of a few options if we didn't want to pass it on. We could do IVF or we could kind of get pregnant and then do genetic testing. All I'd ever heard about IVF was that it was extremely expensive and really emotionally challenging. In retrospect, I wish we had done IVF, and I'm actually in the process of doing IVF right now for number 2. So we did not make the right choice for me, but we just, at the time, we thought it was the right choice. So we decided to at least for the first go, get pregnant naturally and do genetic testing. Because I'm someone who's, very strongly pro-choice and very much believes in that no one should be pregnant who doesn't want to be pregnant, I did not realize how challenging the thought of potentially terminating a wanted pregnancy would be. I really underestimated the emotional toll that would take. So I spent the first couple months of my pregnancy trying not to get too attached, but obviously getting really, really attached because I so desperately wanted to be pregnant, so desperately wanted a baby. I think the hardest part of early pregnancy was we had 2 different ultrasounds, kind of like the normal ultrasound everyone has, and then one connected with the genetic testing. And the ultrasound technicians, they were trying to be so sweet. They were so enthusiastic, but obviously they didn't know what was going on for me. And so they kept being like, oh, your baby is so cute. Your baby's going to be tall, just like your partner. Your baby's so active. Oh, look at what your baby's doing. And at that point, I had been like, this is a fetus, not a baby, to myself. And I just could not watch the ultrasound. I just squeezed my eyes shut. My partner was squeezing my hand. I was crying. And neither technician tuned into that this wasn't working. Eventually I asked one of them to turn off the screen, that I didn't want to see it. And so that was really, really hard. And we did genetic testing, and as we waited for the results, I realized I probably couldn't terminate this pregnancy. And that was hard because that had been the plan depending on the genetic results. But then luckily the results came back that this pregnancy, the fetus did not have the genetic disorder. And so I didn't have to make a decision. I don't know what decision I would have made. And I'm so grateful I didn't have to make a decision. And, we decided then and there, we are not doing this again. This was way too painful. When we decide to have a second kid, we are 100% doing IVF, and we'll figure out the money. We'll figure it out. Luckily, our insurance coverage was way better than we expected. And so now I'm wait, why didn't we do that research? But, I just didn't know. We didn't know. We were doing the best we could with the information we had at the time. But it was kind of a shadow over early pregnancy. Mm-hmm. Other than that, early pregnancy went smoothly, some mild nausea and stuff, but was not too bad. So then we had these results. I was all of a sudden able to kind of embrace bonding with the pregnancy, shared our news with everyone. I was a little disappointed going into second trimester because I feel I had heard from so many people oh, the nausea just goes away. Second trimester, you feel great. And I did feel better, but the nausea didn't fully go away. And I think I had thought that magically, as soon as the second trimester started, it would be gone. I would feel great. Food would be wonderful again. And that wasn't quite my experience, which was a bummer. But for the most part, I was doing well second trimester.
That's good. Yeah. When you read everywhere that the second trimester is the best, that it's kind of a letdown when that's not the case for you.
Yeah. I mean, it still was the best of my trimesters, but you're still pregnant.
Yeah.
One thing I'll mention briefly is, so earlier in my life, kind of in my early 20s, I had struggled some with some disordered eating, some really negative body image. And I'd done a lot of work in therapy and through reading to kind of heal my relationship with my body and with food. I had gotten very into kind of health at every size, intuitive eating, learning to trust my body, learning to read my body signals. I think in this culture, in this diet culture, there's this sense your body's out of control. If you listen to your body, you're just never going to stop eating. And I did a lot of work to kind of unlearn those narratives and learn that my body actually has a lot of wisdom. And my body, if I trust it, if I learn how to tune into it, is not going to lead me astray if I give it kind of a variety of options. And I think when I had an eating disorder, the idea of getting pregnant was terrifying because the scariest thing in the world to me was gaining weight. And I knew I wanted kids, but I was how am I going to be emotionally during pregnancy? And how am I going to be in postpartum when all I want to do is focus on a baby, but also lose pregnancy weight? And I was so grateful for that body image work I had done because throughout pregnancy, pregnancy is hard. Your body feels out of control. So there were some hard moments, but I just really leaned into trusting my body of if I listen to when I'm hungry, if I listen to when I'm full, my body is going to get the nutrition it needs. It's going to gain the weight it needs. I'm not going to weigh myself or worry about how much I'm going to gain or not. I'm just going to know that my body knows how to do this. And it meant I was able to like really embrace my pregnant body and my postpartum body in a way that like would not have been possible if I hadn't really put in the work a number of years earlier. And yeah, I think pregnancy just would have been a very different journey if my relationship with food and with my body was what it had been at a certain point in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good that you felt good about that aspect of things.
Yeah. So then maybe I'll talk briefly about my OB and finding my OB. So I did not have an OB going into pregnancy because, I had this OB/GYN who talked about the bloody surgery and I was not going back to her. And then my fibroid surgery was not an OB. She only did fibroid stuff. So she gave me a few names and I researched the different OB/GYNs and picked one. And she was absolutely amazing. Like from the first appointment, she just had this energy of, she was clearly an expert, but like she had just like this warm motherly energy. And I just instantly felt this trust with her. And she was the perfect OB for me because I'm someone who believes strongly in women being at the center of their own birth experiences, but also needed a very medicalized birth in that I needed a C-section. And she is someone who was an OB in a midwife practice. So she was doing all the C-sections, but she had maybe some of the holistic, women-centered stuff from practicing with midwives for all those years. So she's no longer there now. She's at the hospital where I get my care. But I felt like I could trust her both to be an expert at giving C-sections, but also to show up to an appointment maybe more like a midwife would and act like she had all the time in the world to answer my questions and really center what I wanted and want to hear my opinions on things. And so I just felt really grateful to find her. As we started working together, I told her about my surgeon's recommendation of a C-section at 37 weeks. And she was extremely collaborative around that. She was like, 37 weeks. Like, let me talk to your surgeon. Let me look at your surgery report. I would much rather give you a C-section at like 39 weeks when the chances of NICU stay are lower, the chances of feeding difficulties are lower. And so she read my whole surgery report. She talked to my surgeon. She came back to me and really talked to me about the pros and cons. And I think sometimes in medicine, people really focused on the worst case scenario. And she really focused on, okay, this is the chance of the worst case scenario, but these are the chances of some of these kind of maybe more quality of life things of like, what would it be like for you if your baby was in the NICU for the first few days? And really as a team with me wanted to discuss which are my priorities? When do I want to have this C-section given these different risk factors? And we settled on having the C-section just at like 39 weeks. And that really built trust that I was making some decisions around this C-section in a way that other care providers were like, nope, you have to have it at 37 weeks. You have to have a C-section. And so then I also asked her like, hey, could I have a vaginal birth? Like maybe if the 37 weeks wasn't true, maybe I didn't need to have a C-section. And she was willing to engage in that conversation too. She was like, well, if you go into labor early, that's something we could certainly try. You'd have to have a lot more monitoring because of the increased risk of uterine rupture. And if you had uterine rupture, these are the stats from this hospital about how serious that would be. And if you had uterine rupture, if you had a future pregnancy, you would have to have a C-section at 33 weeks. And we just really discussed it. And she was open to kind of overseeing a vaginal birth. And so then I had a moment where I was like, this decision, I had come to terms with a C-section in many ways. And then this decision was reopened. And that both was exciting, but also scary. And I sat with it for a while and I was like, okay, what about having a vaginal birth feels important to me? And I think the things I came to is lower risk in certain contexts. Okay, it's a different birthing experience where you have your support system around you, where kind of you're in charge. And I realized many of the things I wanted from a vaginal birth, I wasn't going to ever get from a vaginal birth because the people around me were going to be stressed out. I was going to be stressed out because of this heightened risk of something going wrong because of my surgery. And it wasn't lower risk for me. It was actually higher risk than a surgery for me. And so I was then able to come back to my OB and be like, actually, I'm opting into a C-section. And so I was given back kind of like choice and the reins. And she was like, yeah, she's like, I 100% was going to support you with a vaginal birth, but like, I think you're making the right decision given the risk factors. I think after that, like any feelings I had about having a C-section were gone. Like I could just embrace the upsides and I had made the decision. And I'm like so grateful I found an OB who was like willing to be on a team with me and figure that out together and listen to like what was important to me. And even though the decision we came to was the original decision, that felt like a really important part of kind of building acceptance.
Yeah, and just having all the information and informed consent. such an important thing.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, so then, late pregnancy, I had more symptoms. The baby was breech for a long time, so I had a lot of shortness of breath, which was hard. I had a lot of back pain, but nothing terrible, just my body started feeling less good. Had a lot of trouble sleeping, did a lot of kind of like 2 a.m. nesting, which was fun, but also not ideal. I was like, okay, I want to sleep before the baby gets here. I was due January 12th, I believe, or January something, and then the C-section was scheduled for January 3rd. So the last couple weeks of pregnancy were a little stressful for me for a few reasons. I think once I hit that 37 weeks that my surgeon had recommended the C-section, I started to get really nervous of like, if something goes wrong, I'm going to feel like it's kind of my fault for not having the C-section when my surgeon recommended it. And I had is my OB too lackadaisical about risk? And even though I really trusted her, it was hard to be in that 2 weeks between the recommended time for my surgeon and the recommended time for my OB. The other thing that was happening then was the holidays, and my partner and I, Christmas is really important to us. Both of us are really close with our families. And so my family, luckily, is only a couple hours away from Chicago, but my current insurance, it's like I'm only in network at my hospital. And so the idea of traveling and being near other hospitals where we'd have to fight with insurance, where it wouldn't be my OB, felt scary, but also just being like alone in Chicago with my partner over Christmas did not sound fun. And so I went back and forth a lot on like, is the risk of going home worth it? Is it not? And so we ended up doing an abbreviated trip home to Indiana to see our families. And that was nice, but I was definitely a little on edge until I was back home, a 5-minute drive from the hospital where there was medical care I really trusted. Yeah. And so then there's the last few days of the middle of the night nesting really intensified, and I barely slept the last couple of days of pregnancy. And then the night before my C-section was really sweet. We had a little pre-baby celebration with my co-op. My sister and one of my best friends, not the one we're co-parenting with, but a different one, made these like blondie chocolate chip bars, and everyone kind of was there to wish us off to a successful C-section and birth. And I just felt like really loved and really, really held by my community in that moment. And yeah, I went to bed and I tried to sleep in as long as possible because I'm someone who loves drinking water, and I really struggle when I'm not drinking lots of water. And for the C-section, I couldn't drink water for maybe 9 or 12 hours, and my C-section was at 1. So I wanted to reduce as much as possible the number of awake hours I'd have to have in the morning without drinking water, which was really challenging for me. It was honestly one of the hardest parts of the C-section was just having such a dry mouth for hours beforehand. But I know I'm a little weird that way. And so then we had to go a few hours early for the C-section. The plan was my partner was going to be in the C-section with me. And then my mom was going to be in the immediate waiting room because I could think we could only have one person there. And then my partner's parents and my sister and our co-parent were going to be in kind of the general hospital waiting room. And so, we went back and we started getting ready for surgery. My OB came through the main door. And so she chatted with my mom for a while beforehand, which was really sweet. And she and my mom had this bonding moment, which will become relevant in a moment. Getting ready for the surgery was nice. We were getting all these texts and videos from friends, and we're feeling like really loved going into it. There was one strange moment waiting to go into surgery, which was, so my partner is non-binary. And so one thing we had decided to do was mainly raise our kid using they, them pronouns until they were older and could share with us or have more input around how they wanted to be gendered. And as we were sitting there, you're kind of in this, it's not an actual room. You just have curtains around you. And the nurses were talking. And one of the nurses was like, I know this family and they're so weird. They're raising their kids with they, them pronouns and they're going to ruin their kid's life. And I'm so worried about it. And here I am like anxious about becoming a new parent, anxious about going into surgery. And I'm like, oh no, I'm going to mess up my kid. This random nurse I've never met is judging me. I mean, she didn't know I was doing that too.
Yeah, that's a really bad way to act as a nurse, though, in general. Like, shouldn't be gossiping.
Yeah, I'm like, maybe be careful about what conversations you're having if your patients are overhearing you.
Yeah, totally. Especially because, like, the parents are going to remember these things. Like, obviously, this stuck out to you. And I remember being at my friend's birth and, like, we overheard the nurses kind of bashing the fact that she had a birth plan. And this was before she even gave birth. And it's just like, you don't want to overhear that. Like, these people should just be there to take care of you. Maybe save the gossip for like the nurses' lounge or something.
Yeah, they got in depth about all of their dating lives. We got some good gossip waiting for the C-section to happen. So then I went into the C-section. And so initially you go in by yourself, or at least that's how it was at my hospital. And there's lots of people. It's a big, bright room. And so they start with doing kind of the spinal. So I was going to be awake, but had maybe, I think what's kind of like an extra strong epidural, basically. And that was a little strange. So the needle going in went well. They have you sit up, the needle goes in, and then they had me lay back. And a couple different things happened. First, they had me put my legs kind of in froggy position because then they started putting in the catheter as my body was going numb. And so my body starts going numb and my legs are in this really uncomfortable position. And so then my legs are numb, but they still feel like they're in the froggy position. So I kept asking I forget if it was a nurse or tech or some, and like, hey, can I straighten my legs? And they're like, hey, your legs are straight. And that was just really, I felt so uncomfortable, but then seeing my legs were straight, but they felt like they were in this uncomfortable position was really disorienting for me and started to make my anxiety go way up. And then my blood pressure dropped when they put in the medicine. And so there was this hustle and bustle to get my blood pressure back up. And there was an attending doctor, a resident, and a tech all dealing with the medicine in the epidural. And the attending said so the resident had given the medicine, and the attending said to the resident, like, hey, how much did you give her? I'm not going to have these numbers right, but did you give her 50 or 100? And the resident said, I gave her 200. And then there was this moment of silence. And I was like, I'm going to die. Like, whatever the resident did, like, it wasn't right. I'm going to die. I didn't die. I asked my OB about it later, and she looked in my chart and she's like, yeah, whatever dose you got, it was a really reasonable dose. So I don't know what you overheard or why that weird moment happened. But, they got my blood pressure back up. My legs started to feel more normal. They invited my partner in. My partner is really good at helping me calm down. I got some head pats. I got a hand to hold. And then my OB started being more the person in charge. First, it was anesthesiologist in charge, and then it was my OB in charge. And she just had a way to be in charge of the room that felt much more calming to me. And so they got started. And one thing that surprised me was the cutting me open was really fast. And then my upper stomach was not numb. So I could feel all this pushing, and it was so intense. It felt like it was like this full body sport my OB was doing. I'm just like yanking and tugging and pushing this baby out. And I was like, what is happening? I kind of expected to feel nothing. So I was really surprised by, it wasn't pain, but just the intensity of feeling kind of the baby being pulled and shoved out of my abdomen. So then my OB pulled the baby out and she lifted them above the curtain and she said, "Oh, you have a red head," which was a funny moment because the baby's hair was not particularly red and neither is my hair or my partner's hair. So both of us were like, no, we don't. But we just said that to each other. But we were so excited to see the baby. The baby was crying. And I believe a nurse brought the baby over and set the baby on my neck. And that was both so sweet, but also a little funny. They have the curtain, up above my breast. So there was not a lot of space. The baby was kind of up on my upper chest and neck. And they were trying so hard to nurse. And I had these electrodes on me. And so they kept trying to latch onto the electrodes. So my partner was kind of holding the baby's mouth off of the electrodes because we're like, we don't know if this is safe. Maybe it's fine. So we'd sometimes let them suck on it a little bit and then sometimes try and make them stop. But it was really sweet. I was just, I had my hand stroking the baby. My partner was also kind of alternating, stroking the baby, holding my hand, stroking my hair, or I had a cap on, but, stroking my head through the cap. And that was really sweet to be there all together for that moment. And the baby was, as soon as they put them on me, they calmed down and they were just moving around a little bit, trying to nurse. But other than that, pretty content. Then eventually the nurses came and grabbed the baby to bring them to a table right there in the C-section room to weigh them, give them the vitamin K shot, clean them up, do some measurements, just make sure everything was okay. And that was a bit of an odd moment for a few reasons. There were so many different people in the room that they had the table set up so it was in view of me, but random people kept just kind of like standing in my line of vision. And I needed to see my baby. So I kept having to ask the random techs and nurses, and I don't even know who all the people were, like, "Hey, can you get out of my room?" And I get out of my view. And I kept asking my partner to advocate for me to do that. And my partner's usually a pretty good advocator, but I think can get really subservient in medical settings. So they kept being real gentle, like, "Hey, can you please step aside just a little bit so that she can see the baby?" And so hopefully when I have a C-section again, that's something I'm going to say up front, like, can you make sure no one's standing in my line of sight to the baby? Like, if the baby's not on me, I want to see the baby. Another funny thing that happened in that moment is they kept trying to get my partner to get up and go over to the table where the baby was, but not to touch the baby, but they're like, "You can come stand by the baby." And the baby's like getting measured and screaming, but we weren't allowed to really touch or comfort the baby. And so my partner was like, "My wife's on the table getting surgery. I know how to comfort her. I don't know how to comfort a baby I'm not able to touch that you guys are doing these things with." So they kept kind of wandering back to me and wandering back to like holding my hand, touching my head. And then the nurse would be like, no, you're allowed to be over here with the baby. And we were both like, "Well, but they want to be with me. I'm the one in surgery right now. We're going to have lots of bonding time with the baby when we can hold and cuddle and the baby." And then they brought the baby back to me. Baby was on my chest again. We got to kind of go back to me and my partner stroking the baby while the baby tried to nurse on the electrodes. And then towards the end of surgery, my OB had a resident take over doing kind of the final stitching. And she comes around the curtain to check in on how we're doing. And she's like, "Okay, so have you, sent a picture to the grandma in the waiting room?" And my partner's like, "Oh, I haven't taken any pictures. I've just been present to my wife and my baby." And she chastised us. She's like, "You haven't told them the baby's born and that everyone's healthy and safe."
Oh my gosh.
And we were like, no, we were kind of in the moment. And she's like, "Well, I'm going to go tell your mom that you're okay." And so she marches out of the surgery to go to the waiting room to tell my mom I'm okay.
Oh my gosh.
And I had this mixed reaction. I was like, this is so sweet. She clearly had a great conversation with my mom, and my mom's a sweetheart. I love my mom. And so this is so great. And my mom's going to be thrilled to hear I'm okay. My mom was, certainly nervous about her first kid having a baby. And I was like, wait, I'm still in surgery. I'm still being stitched up. Shouldn't my doctor be in the room with me? Not going and chatting with my mom in the waiting room. But the resident finished everything up and I got out of surgery and, we're wheeled back into that little curtain waiting area. And we had to wait there for a bit for me to stabilize. And that part was a little bit stressful. At that point, I think my baby really, really wanted to nurse, but I didn't know how to nurse. And later we got some great support with breastfeeding, but the nurses who were in this section were more surgery nurses, so they were not great with supporting with breastfeeding. And so we were just there. I'm kind of groggy or not groggy, but I just went through surgery. I have this baby crying on my chest. I don't know how to nurse it. My partner's trying to help me nurse, but knows nothing about nursing other than the basics. And so it was both really sweet and so nice to be with my baby and just a lot to manage. And then finally, we got the green light to kind of be transferred to the postpartum area. And right as that happened, my baby fell asleep on my chest. And, we walked through the hospital together. And that was really nice. And then we got to kind of cycle through everyone else to see me and the baby. So my partner's parents came in briefly. My sister, our co-parent, came in. And my parents came in. And we had just a couple of hours. The surgery had kind of started late, gone late. And so we only had a couple hours of visiting time. But that was really sweet. And then the nurses in postpartum were amazing at helping with nursing. And really, especially one of them was, even more helpful than the lactation consultant who came the next day and teaching me a few different positions and really talking me through things. And so we got latched and that went smoother than I anticipated. And so then we had decided initially that we were going to, so only one person could be with me overnight. So we were going to have my mom do that the first night and then my partner do that the next night. And then either my sister or other co-parent do that the following night. But then it turned out it had to be the same person every night. And we decided my mom was going to stay with me because she had breastfed 4 kids. She knew a lot about breastfeeding. And I think it's something that we knew would make her feel really special and loved. And my mom's such a caring person. I was like, yeah, she would be great to have with me overnight and my partner could be there kind of with me during the day. And that ended up being really, really sweet. My mom, she's amazing. She stayed up all night, both nights, just holding the baby. Other than when I was nursing or holding the baby, she was like, we're not going to worry about trying to figure out this bassinet. We're not going to worry about figuring out swaddling. I'll just hold the baby all night. I'll sleep during the day while your partner is here and while other folks are here with you. And we just had some really sweet bonding time. And yeah, my hospital stay was pretty good for the most part. We had some great nurses. We had, these same 6 people, my parents, my partner's parents, our co-parents kind of cycling in and out. It was hard for me to sleep. Hospitals need to figure something out. They have people in there all night long. They had this thing that from 2 to 4 a.m. and 2 to 4 p.m., they weren't supposed to have medical people in because it was supposed to be family bonding time. And they didn't even follow that. There were people in from 2 to 4 a.m. And I was like, you can't even give us 2 hours. So that was a little frustrating. And I think if next hospital stay, I've thought about are there ways I could advocate better for myself to just get a little bit more sleep? Because it felt like it was so hard to sleep because I just wanted to be with my baby. And then when I finally convinced myself to stop and be with my baby, I'd fall asleep and 20 minutes later, someone would come in and wake me up. And I could tell my body just desperately needed sleep. So then we had to stay in the hospital 2 nights. They talked about us staying a 3rd night because I had 1 high blood pressure reading during that time where we were just out of surgery and my baby was crying and it was an auto blood pressure thing. So I wasn't even noticing when it was taking a reading. And so I had no other high reading. So it was a little frustrating that we had to stay longer because of that. But we ended up not having to stay a third night. It was just like, instead of leaving at 9 a.m., we left at like 5 p.m. And then by then I had enough blood pressure readings that were normal that they let us go. My sister drove us home from the hospital. She was so sweet. She drove so incredibly slow. We were all just so nervous about having a newborn. My partner and our other co-parent were biking home and were going to meet us, and they beat us by so much because my sister just was being so cautious because it's January 3rd, it's snowy, it's icy. She's like, I am not going to let this baby crash. And, it was just neighborhood streets. So, we didn't even need to get on a highway or anything, but we made it home. Early on being home, I had pretty high anxiety. I live in a basement bedroom, and I just remember thinking, like, I'm such an idiot for living in a basement. Steps are so dangerous. Like, my baby's going to die from us falling down the steps holding them. Like, how could I have thought this was a good decision? And, now I go up and down the steps all the time and don't think about it. And everything just... I was like, how could I possibly have a baby in the winter? This baby's going to get COVID, is going to get the flu. Like, that was such a dumb decision. And, my brain really, everything seemed just so serious and so dangerous to this like fragile newborn baby who I just, loved more than I could have ever imagined. So the first night home in my bedroom, it was me sleeping there, and then my partner and then our co-parent Sawyer was like sleeping on the floor. So that they could take turns helping with middle of the night wakes. And the baby fell asleep fine at 8 p.m., slept through to 10 or 11 p.m., and I was desperately needed sleep. And I was trying to fall asleep at 8 when the baby fell asleep. And I just got so anxious because I was like, I can't believe we're not in the hospital. If something goes wrong, what are we going to do? And like the other nights, my mom had been awake holding the baby all night. So I was like, we're not in the hospital, and I'm going to be asleep while the baby's asleep. No one's going to be awake watching this baby and making sure they're alive. And that just seemed so dangerous to me. But eventually, my co-parent was really comforting. My partner was really comforting. Eventually, I kind of like calmed down. I think at that point, I was really grateful that I was a therapist and knew a lot about anxiety and knew like, just because I'm having these thoughts doesn't mean these thoughts are true, and knew that a lot of this was just anxiety and that it would probably get better. And over the next few days, as I slept more, I kind of like watched my brain calm down and like go back to my normal brain, which is still an anxious brain. But I think if I hadn't been able to get some of the sleep I was able to get postpartum, I think I would have had really full-fledged like postpartum anxiety, because I certainly had like maybe the beginning of it, but then luckily sleep really helped heal my brain. And I was, anxious, but okay and functioning, and not like I was those first couple of days. So that first night, we got very little sleep. Anytime the baby woke up, one of them would get up or I would nurse, and there was just so much commotion. And, at 5 or 6 a.m., we texted, I think my partner's mom was like, or the thread with everyone on it. And we're like, if anyone's awake and wants some early morning time with the baby, we would love to sleep more. And the 2 grandmas hung out with the baby, and we all slept more. And then us 4 co-parents got together in the middle of the day and we're like, hey, that didn't work. What is our sleep plan? And that is a period I love parenting with 4 people, but that is a period I was so grateful we had 4 people, because the 3 of them just signed up for shifts. So from 9 p.m. to 9 a.m., they just divvied that up into either 3 or 4 shifts, depending on if a grandparent was helping out. And all I had to do was breastfeed. They would take the baby, change the baby, bring the baby upstairs, rock the baby, sit with the baby, hold the baby, bring the baby to me if the baby seemed hungry, and then take the baby away. And we had 2 weeks where we always had someone on like baby duty. And then after that, the baby was getting better at sleeping in the bassinet. And so then we went more to, okay, just me and my partner being in the bedroom and the 2 of us being in charge overnight. And I was still exhausted, but it allowed me to be a breastfeeding parent and catch up on sleep a little bit in a way that I think was so good for both my mental health and recovering from the C-section.
Yeah, it sounds awesome.
Yeah, no, it was great. And then anyone who came to visit, we'd be like, yeah, sure, you can visit, but you're going to be part of the overnight rotation. So my brother and his wife came, and it's like, yeah, sure, but like you're on 1 to 3 a.m. and you're on 3 to 6 a.m. And people were so sweet, but that it's like, we were like, that's what we need. We need middle of the night help. And we love visitors as long as they're willing to do some middle of the night help because, we didn't need food. We didn't need a lot of maybe the other things that people need in postpartum period because like the co-op, like there's meals every night. Like we didn't need that, but we were like, there's still ways to help. Yeah. So then, we had these 2 wonderful weeks where like, we were all off work. We were all just together with the baby. Then I had 3 months of maternity leave. And then after that, my partner took some family leave and recovery went well. I'm a very independent person, so not being able to lift was hard, but we made it through. There was one moment where I was on the floor doing tummy time with my baby and definitely shouldn't have. And when I stood up, kind of pulled something around where the C-section scar was and then was in a ton of pain for a few days. And so that stunk. And I've learned a little bit about taking it easy post-surgery. But my doctor said, yeah, don't get on the floor. But yes, you are fine. You don't need to come back in. Breastfeeding went well, less painful than I expected. And then, yeah, we've just kind of gone from there. Maybe as we have continued to parent with 4 of us, that's kind of evolved. Every week we have what we call our co-parenting meeting, and we kind of assign, okay, who's going to be the point parent when, who's going to be in charge of what this week. And it means I know when I'm on parenting and I know when I'm off and can do other things. And sometimes we're all hanging out together and sometimes it's just one of us with the baby. And now we're starting IVF for number 2, and that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, that's exciting. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and your experience parenting as a 4-parent household. It's definitely a new share on the birth hour. So I'm sure lots of people are going to be interested to learn more about that. Do you have resources you want to share?
Yeah, not a ton. Honestly, the biggest way I learned about pregnancy was through the birth hour. Every time I love walking. That's the only kind of exercise I do. And so I would just take these long walks in pregnancy and listen to the birth hour. Anytime I was cleaning or doing chores or had downtime, I listened to hundreds of episodes while I was pregnant. And, I just felt like I knew so much about all the different things that could happen. And that was so, so helpful. I also read Expecting Better, and I feel like that was useful for just the very basics of like, what foods can I eat? What can I not? How do I make those decisions? In terms of parenting, I really have recently loved the book, How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen, and the book Siblings Without Rivalry. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of kind of relationship with body stuff, I'd really recommend the books Intuitive Eating and The Anti-Diet and Health at Every Size and the Maintenance Phase podcast.
All right. Well, we'll link to those. And then what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Yeah, I have attached an email address that'll be in the show notes, and people are welcome to leave a comment, and I'd be glad to respond.
All right. Well, thank you so much again for coming on and sharing.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, head to thebirthhour.com and click Become a Member to pledge your support. And as a thank you, you'll get an invitation to join our private Facebook group and access to exclusive episodes. Your vote of confidence and support means the world to me.